Your parents started grieving you long before you died, started mourning the child you were supposed to become while you were still sitting across from them at dinner. You didn't notice at first, thought the distance was normal, thought all families had this specific silence, but it wasn't silence. It was the sound of them loving a ghost, a child who never existed, a version of you they needed you to be. And when you became yourself instead, when you chose the life you actually wanted, they didn't celebrate. They grieved, still grieve. Every holiday, every phone call, every time they look at you and see the stranger you became instead of the child they planned. Before we go further, I want to thank the first subscribers to Raw Existence. You're the ones willing to hear the truth nobody else will say. If you're tired of pretending your family understands you, subscribe right now. We don't do happy endings here, we do honest ones. Like this video, if you've ever felt like a disappointment for becoming yourself, comment below and tell me when you realized your parents were mourning you. Let's talk about the grief nobody acknowledges. There's a specific moment when parents realize you're not going to be who they needed you to be. It's not dramatic, not a fight or a confession, just a quiet recognition. You say something or choose something or become something that doesn't fit the plan they had, and you watch their face change, not anger, not even disappointment yet, just realization. The future they'd been building in their heads just collapsed, and you're standing there being yourself, not knowing you just killed their dream. For some, it's when you choose the wrong career. Tell them you're not going to be a doctor or lawyer or whatever respectable thing they told their friends you'd become. You're going to be an artist or a teacher or something that doesn't make enough money to prove they raised you right. And they smile. Say they support you, but something dies in their eyes, something that won't come back. For others, it's sexuality, gender, religion, politics. Any of the fundamental things about who you are that don't match who they needed you to be. You come out, you leave the church, you vote differently, you marry someone they can't show off at parties, and they say they love you anyway. But the anyway does all the work in that sentence, tells you everything about the love you're actually getting. The conditional kind, the kind that has to overcome what you are to still exist. I'm watching the field behind my house right now. There's a tree growing crooked, not dead, not dying, just growing at an angle that isn't straight up. And the tree doesn't apologize for its shape, doesn't try to bend itself back to vertical to make the other trees comfortable, just grows the way it grows, takes the light it can get from the angle it's at. And I wonder if the tree knows it's disappointing anyone. If trees have parents who expected them to grow straight. Your parents had a photo album in their heads, full of pictures of a child who doesn't exist. You graduating from the right school. You marrying the right person. You giving them the right grandchildren. You living in the right neighborhood. You being the right amount of successful in the right kind of way. And every choice you make that isn't in those photos is another photo that won't happen. Another future that dies. Another version of you they have to mourn, and they can't help it. They built that photo album before you could talk, before you had any say in who you'd become. They looked at you as a baby and saw potential, saw all the things you could be. And then they picked one, decided which version of all your possible futures was the best one, the one that would make them proudest, the one they could tell stories about. And they raised you toward that version, guided you, pushed you, made choices for you that aimed you at becoming the child in the photos, but you didn't. You became someone else, someone real, someone actual, someone who doesn't exist in their album, and now they're stuck. Stuck loving a ghost child who haunts every interaction, who shows up at every dinner in the form of what you're not, who sits invisible next to you being perfect, being everything you're not being. Have you seen it? That moment in their eyes when they realized? Do you remember when the mourning started? Every family dinner, there's an empty chair. Not literally, you're sitting in it. But there's still someone missing, the child they expected, the one who would have made different choices, had different interests, become a different person. That child is dead, never existed, but your parents set a place for them anyway, serve them invisible food, have invisible conversations with them about how well things are going, and you sit there, real, actual, present, and feel like you're the ghost, feel like the imposter, the wrong child, the one who showed up instead of the one they wanted, and they're polite, they ask about your life. But there's a quality to the asking that's different from interest. It's more like documentation. Recording what the wrong child is doing so they can compare it to what the right child would have done. How's work? They ask. And what they mean is, how's the disappointing job you chose instead of the career we planned? Are you seeing anyone? They ask. And what they mean is, have you found someone we can approve of to replace the person we wish you'd found? How are you doing? They ask. And what they mean is, are you happy with your wrong life, or do you regret not becoming who we needed? And you answer. Give updates. Try to make your actual life sound good enough that maybe they'll stop mourning the fake one. But it never works. Because no matter how well you're doing at being yourself, you're still failing at being them. Still not living the life they needed you to live for their life to make sense. There's a specific kind of love that hurts more than hate. The love that comes with disappointment attached. The love that says, I love you, but I'm sad about you. I love you, but you're not what I wanted. I love you, but I wish you were someone else. And that love is what you get at family dinners. Across the table, mixed in with the small talk served with the meal. I knew someone whose parents threw them a birthday party every year. Nice party, good food, presents, the whole performance. But the person they were celebrating wasn't the person in the room. It was the person they wished was in the room. The successful version, the married version, the version with the right life. And my friend would sit there eating cake, meant for someone else, opening presents bought for a child who didn't exist, watching their parents celebrate a ghost. How long are you going to do this? They asked their parents once. Mourn me while I'm still here? And their parents looked confused, said they weren't mourning anything, said they were just worried, just concerned, just wanting what's best. But wanting what's best isn't the same as wanting what's actual, and they wanted the best version of a child they made up, not the actual version sitting in their living room eating their cake. Sartre wrote about bad faith, about people lying to themselves about the choices they're making, pretending they have to be what they are, when really they're choosing it every moment. And your parents are in bad faith about you. They pretend they have to be disappointed, have to be concerned, have to mourn the unmourned child. But they're choosing it. Choosing to love the photo album more than the person, choosing to grieve a fantasy instead of accepting a reality, and you can't make them stop, can't convince them to love who you actually are instead of who you're supposed to be. Because the ghost child is perfect, never makes mistakes, never disappoints, never becomes something they can't explain to their friends. The ghost child is always just out of reach. Always, almost, always the child you could still become if you just tried harder, chose better, became different. But you won't become that child. Can't. That child doesn't exist, never existed, will never exist. And somewhere deep down your parents know this. Know they're grieving someone who was never real. But knowing doesn't stop the grief. Doesn't make them love you more than the fantasy. Doesn't make dinner any less haunted. Do you feel it? The ghost sitting next to you? Do your parents talk to it more than they talk to you? Your parents say they love you, and they mean it. They do love you, but they love you the way you love someone who's dying, with grief already mixed in, with the awareness that the person you're loving isn't the person you needed them to be. They love you and mourn you simultaneously. And the mourning makes the love complicated, makes it heavy, makes every expression of affection come with an unspoken but. I love you, but I wish you'd chosen differently. I'm proud of you, but not in the way I wanted to be proud. You're my child, but not the child I raised you to become. all of it unspoken, all of it living in the silence between the words they actually say. And that silence is loud. Louder than anything they could say out loud. You hear it on phone calls, in the pauses before they respond to your news, in the way they change the subject when you talk about your life, in the questions they don't ask, the interest they don't show, the excitement they can't muster. You tell them about something good that happened, something you're proud of, something that matters to you, and they say, "That's nice." And the nice is so empty you can hear the echo. So polite it's almost cruel, because nice is what you say to strangers, to acquaintances, to people whose lives don't really touch yours, not to your child, not unless that child has become a stranger, and you have become a stranger. To them. They don't know you, don't know the person you actually are, know only the ways you're not the person they expected, can list all the choices you made that surprised them, all the paths you didn't take, all the versions of you that died when you became yourself. But the actual you, the person sitting across from them, they don't know that person, haven't learned that person, don't particularly want to, because learning you would mean accepting that the ghost child is dead, would mean grieving fully and moving on, would mean loving the actual instead of the imagined. And they can't, won't, keep hoping that if they wait long enough, if they stay disappointed long enough, you'll change, become who you were supposed to be, resurrect the ghost, give them back the child they planned for. I'm sitting on my porch right now, same porch that's been slowly rotting for years, and I'm thinking about how the rot doesn't announce itself, doesn't make noise, just slowly weakens the structure until one day you step wrong and your foot goes through. That's what this silence does to relationships, slowly rots them from underneath while everyone pretends the structure is sound, while everyone keeps walking on boards that are turning to dust. Your parents think the silence is protecting you, protecting them, think that not saying the disappointment out loud means it's not there, but you feel it. Every visit, every call, every holiday where you show up as yourself and watch them wish you were someone else, the silence doesn't protect anything, just makes the hurt impossible to address, makes it something you all carry separately, together, but alone. And you've tried to talk about it. Tried to say, "I know I'm not who you wanted, I know you're disappointed. Can we talk about it? Can we grieve together and then maybe move past it?" But they deny it. Say you're being dramatic. Say they love you just the way you are. Say nothing's wrong. And then go right back to the silence, the weighted silence, the silence that sounds like love but feels like abandonment. Kierkegaard wrote about the self, about becoming who you actually are versus who others need you to be. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily, he wrote. To not dare is to lose oneself. And you dared, became yourself, and in becoming yourself, you lost your footing with your parents, fell out of their story, out of their plan, and they can't forgive you for it. Can't forgive you for choosing yourself over the ghost, but you can't lose yourself to keep them comfortable. Can't become the ghost just to make them stop mourning. The ghost isn't real, isn't you, isn't anyone. Just a projection, a fantasy, a story they told themselves that required a character you weren't willing to play. So you live in the silence, visit in the silence, love and are loved in the silence. And the silence is the grief. The ongoing, unacknowledged, never-ending grief for a child who never existed, and a relationship that can't exist because one person in it isn't real. Can you hear it? The silence between you and them. Do you know what it's saying? Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family gathering is a funeral. For the ghost child, for the family you were supposed to be. You show up, sit in your assigned seat, play your part, and the whole time you're attending a service for someone who never lived. The table is set for mourning. The conversation is eulogy. The forced cheerfulness is the performance of people who haven't processed their grief. And everyone pretends it's celebration, pretends this is family togetherness, quality time, making memories. But what you're actually making is another marker, another year the ghost didn't resurrect, another year you stayed yourself instead of becoming them, another year your parents had to swallow their disappointment and pretend they're fine with who you are. The questions are the prayers, still doing that job, still refusing to be successful in the way we measure success, still single, still refusing to complete the family picture we needed, still living there, still refusing to move back home, back to being manageable, back to being ours. Every question is a small mourning, a gentle pushing toward the ghost, a reminder that you're not living right. And you answer. Keep your voice light, keep the conversation moving, but inside you're thinking, when does this end? When do we stop pretending? When do they accept that I am who I am and the child they wanted is never coming? When do we have an actual holiday instead of this annual funeral? But it doesn't end, because grief without acknowledgement doesn't have an ending, just continues, year after year, dinner after dinner. You aging and them aging and the ghost never aging because ghosts don't. The ghost stays the age they needed you to be. 25 and full of potential, 30 and settling down, 35 and established. Whatever age you were when you made the choice that killed them. The choice to be real instead of perfect. I knew someone who stopped going to family holidays, just stopped, sent regrets, stayed home, spent Thanksgiving alone eating pizza, and their family called it cruel, called it selfish, called it punishing them. But it wasn't punishment, it was self-preservation, was refusing to attend their own funeral anymore, was saying, I won't participate in mourning me while I'm still alive. I won't sit at that table and pretend the silence is normal. I won't eat that meal and smile while you wish I was someone else. And their family never understood, called them bitter, called them damaged, said they were throwing away family over nothing. But it wasn't nothing, it was everything. It was choosing to not be a ghost, not be the space where someone else should be, not be the walking reminder of disappointed expectations. The holidays are supposed to be about gratitude, about gathering and being glad for what you have. But your family isn't grateful for you. They're grateful for what you could have been, what you might still become, what you represent in potential instead of what you are in actuality. And being tolerated in place of what's wanted, that's not family. That's haunting. You're haunting your own family gatherings, present but not present, there but not there, real but not recognized. And the worst part is, they think they're being kind, think they're being accepting by not saying the disappointment out loud, think silence is generosity, think hosting you is love. But hospitality to a ghost isn't the same as loving a child. And you can feel the difference, can feel that you're being accommodated, not celebrated, tolerated, not treasured, allowed, not wanted. Bukowski wrote, the problem was you had to keep choosing between one evil or another. And that's your choice at holidays. Attend and feel like a ghost. Or don't attend and feel like a failure. Show up and participate in the mourning. Or stay away and confirm that you're the disappointment they think you are. Either way, you lose. Either way, the ghost wins. Because the ghost is never difficult, never makes anyone choose, never ruins holidays by being actual instead of ideal. Do you go? Do you sit at that table? Do you attend your own funeral every year? Or have you stopped? Have you chosen yourself over the ghost? Your parents say they love you, and you have to translate it, have to decode what they mean versus what they say, because the love comes wrapped in conditions they won't acknowledge, comes with clauses they've never stated out loud. And learning to translate parental love when it's not freely given, that's a skill nobody teaches you, a skill you learn by necessity, by survival. We love you means We love who you could still become. We're proud of you means we're proud you're ours, but not proud of your choices. We support you means we'll tolerate this until you come to your senses. Every expression of affection has a subtext. Every moment of warmth has a temperature limit. And you learn to hear both, the words and what they're hiding, and the translation is exhausting, means you're never just receiving love, always analyzing it, always checking it for conditions, always aware that the love is provisional, that it could be revoked if you become more yourself, more different, more distant from the ghost. They call on your birthday, "Happy birthday, we love you." And you hear, "We love you despite who you are. We love you even though you're not who we wanted. We love you, but we're still mourning." And you say thank you, say you love them too, and mean it. But your love isn't translated, isn't coded. You love them as they are, flawed and disappointed and stuck in grief. Love them without needing them to be different. And they can't do the same for you, can't love you without the silent "but" attached. I'm watching a dog in the field right now, and the dog loves its owner completely. Doesn't care if the owner is successful or married or living the right life, just loves, unconditionally, purely. And I'm thinking about how we're supposed to be smarter than dogs, more evolved, more complex. But we've complicated love to the point where it barely works. Added so many conditions and expectations that love becomes a test you can fail, a standard you can fall short of. Your parents failed that test with you. Or maybe you failed their test. Depends on who's keeping score. But either way, the love between you is complicated, is difficult, requires translation and navigation and constant awareness of what's not being said. And that's not how love is supposed to work. Love is supposed to be the simple part, the foundation, the thing you can count on even when everything else is uncertain. But your foundation has cracks, has places where the love doesn't quite reach, where the disappointment seeps through, where the mourning lives. And you've learned to build your life on a cracked foundation, learned to accept that your parents' love comes with limits, that you can be loved and mourned simultaneously, that someone can care about you and wish you were someone else at the same time. And maybe that's made you better at conditional love. Better at loving people who don't meet your expectations, better at accepting people as they are instead of who you need them to be. Or maybe it's made you worse, made you accept less than you deserve, made you think all love requires translation, made you believe that being loved despite yourself is the best you can hope for. Either way, you know something most people don't. Know that parental love isn't guaranteed, isn't automatic, isn't unconditional just because they're your parents. Know that you can be someone's child and still not be the child they love most. Know that the ghost can win even though the ghost isn't real. And knowing that changes you, makes you careful, makes you perform, makes you edit yourself even as an adult, even in your own life, even when they're not watching, because you've internalized their disappointment, made it yours. Started mourning yourself through their eyes, started seeing the ghost in the mirror, started wishing you were the person they needed even as you choose to be the person you are. The field outside doesn't translate anything. The grass grows or doesn't grow, the wind blows or doesn't blow, and none of it needs to be decoded, none of it has subtext, just is what it is, simple, clear, honest. And you can't be like that with your parents. Can't be simple, can't be clear. Have to navigate, have to translate, have to decode their love to receive it. Do you translate their words? Do you hear the conditions? Do you love them back in the same coded language? Or do you love them clearly and hope someday they'll learn to do the same? Your parents have stories about you. Stories they tell at gatherings, at parties, to friends and relatives. And the stories are about the ghost, about who you were before you became yourself, about the potential you had, about the child they recognized before that child became a stranger. And when they tell these stories, you're standing right there. Adult, actual, real. and they're talking about you like you died years ago. They were so smart, they say, past tense, like intelligence expired when you chose the wrong career. They could have been anything, they say, could have been but chose not to be, could have been but became this instead, could have been but failed. And you stand there nodding, smiling, being the present tense version of someone they only love, in past tense. And the stories aren't lies exactly. They're just selective. They remember the version of you that fit their narrative. The good student, the obedient child, the one who hadn't yet made choices they couldn't support. They remember that version with such clarity, such detail, such love. And they remember current you with, what? Disappointment, confusion, the polite distance of people who've met you but don't really know you. I knew someone whose parents introduced them to people as our son who went to Harvard, not our son who's a teacher, not our son who lives in the city, just our son who went to Harvard 20 years ago. That was the defining fact, the peak, the moment they were most proud. Everything since then was just aftermath. The long, disappointing decline from the child who got into Harvard to the adult who became a public school teacher, making $40,000 a year. And every introduction was a reminder. You peaked at 18. You were most valuable when you were potential, most lovable when you were promise. Now you're just what you became. And what you became isn't enough, will never be enough. Because you didn't become the ghost, didn't fulfill the potential they saw, didn't leverage Harvard into the life they needed you to have. The stories your parents tell reveal what they value, what they loved most about you, and usually it's something you can't be anymore, something you were before you had agency, before you could choose, when you were still moldable, still theirs, still heading toward the life they'd planned. The stories stop when your choices start. When you become yourself, when you kill the ghost, and you can't ask them to stop telling the stories, can't say, stop remembering me in past tense, stop talking about who I was, like who I am isn't here, because they don't see it as erasure, see it as celebration, see it as honoring the child they loved most. Don't realize that honoring past you is dismissing present you. Don't understand that loving who you were means not loving who you are. Sartre said we are our choices, that we become ourselves through the accumulated decisions we make. And by that measure, you're more yourself now than you've ever been, more actual, more real, more the person you chose to become. But your parents don't value choices, don't value becoming. They value being what they needed, being what they planned, being the ghost. So the stories continue, the past tense eulogies for the child who stopped existing when you started choosing, and you listen, smile, play along, because correcting them feels cruel. Saying, I'm right here, I'm still your child, why don't you have stories about who I am now, feels like attacking, feels like making them admit the grief they won't acknowledge. And you can't do that to them, can't force them to see what they're doing, can't make them love you if they've chosen to love the ghost instead. The field behind my house doesn't have a past tense, doesn't have a version of itself that was better or worse, just is, just exists as what it is right now. And tomorrow it'll be different. And that'll be fine. It won't mourn its own changes, won't wish it was still the field it was 5 years ago. Just continues. Just exists, just is what it is without needing to be what it was. But you can't be like the field, can't exist purely in present tense, because your parents won't let you, keep pulling you back to who you were, keep celebrating the ghost, keep telling stories about the dead child while the living one stands there being ignored. Do your parents have stories about you now, about who you actually are? Or do all their stories stop the year you started becoming yourself? You carry the ghost everywhere. The child your parents needed you to be lives in your head. Whispers what they would have done, how they would have chosen, what they would have become, and you can't shut it up, can't make it leave, because it's not just their ghost anymore. It's yours too. You've internalized it, made it part of your internal dialogue. Part of how you judge yourself? Every choice you make, the ghost offers an alternative. The ghost would have taken the stable job. The ghost would have married by now. The ghost would have bought a house, had kids, been successful in measurable ways. And even though you know the ghost isn't real, even though you've chosen not to be the ghost, the comparison happens, the measuring happens, the disappointment in yourself for not being what you were supposed to be, that happens. And that's what parental disappointment does. It doesn't stay external, doesn't stay their problem. It becomes yours. You adopt their mourning, start grieving yourself, start wishing you were the person who would have made them happy. Even as you continue being the person you actually are, you split, become two people, the actual and the wished for, and you carry both. The weight of it is enormous, not just living your life, but also carrying the unlived life. Not just being yourself, but also being conscious of who you're not. Not just making choices, but measuring every choice against what the ghost would have chosen. The ghost becomes your shadow, your constant companion, your internal disappointed parent. I knew someone who kept a list, mentally, of all the ways they weren't the ghost, wasn't a doctor, wasn't married, wasn't successful, wasn't happy in the ways happiness is supposed to look. And the list got longer every year. Every birthday added another item, another way they'd failed to become what they were supposed to be, and they couldn't stop keeping the list, couldn't stop measuring, couldn't stop mourning themselves through their parents' eyes. And the cruelty of it is, the ghost never ages, never fails, never gets tired or makes mistakes or has doubts. The ghost is eternally potential, eternally perfect, eternally the child who would have done everything right, and you're aging, failing, getting tired, making mistakes, having doubts. You're real, and real can't compete with imaginary, can't measure up to perfect, can't win against a fantasy that's never tested by reality, so you lose. Every comparison, you lose. Every measurement, you come up short. Every time you check yourself against the ghost, you find yourself lacking. And that's the weight, the constant losing to someone who doesn't exist. The permanent inadequacy of being real when what's wanted is ideal. And your parents don't know they've done this to you, don't know they've installed a disappointed observer in your head that sounds like their voice, don't know you're carrying the ghost for them, doing their mourning for them. Grieving yourself so they don't have to admit they're grieving you. They think you're fine, think you've moved on, think you don't care what they think, but you care. You've always cared. You care so much you've made their disappointment your own, made their grief your burden, made their ghost your constant companion. And you can't tell them, can't say, you put this in my head and I can't get it out. Because they deny it. Say you're being dramatic. Say they've only ever wanted you to be happy. And maybe they believe that. Maybe they don't know that wanting you to be happy and wanting you to be the ghost are different things. Maybe they think they're the same. Kierkegaard wrote about despair, about the sickness of not being yourself, of being always in the process of becoming yourself, but never arriving. And that's what carrying the ghost does. Makes you always in process, always not quite yourself. Always measuring against an impossible standard, always despairing over the self you're not, instead of accepting the self you are. The grass in the field doesn't carry a ghost, doesn't imagine a better version of itself, just grows, just is, just exists as what it is without comparison. And that seems like freedom, like peace, like something you'll never have as long as the ghost lives in your head. As long as your parents' disappointed voices narrate your choices, as long as you measure yourself against impossible and find yourself wanting. Can you put down the ghost? Can you stop carrying them? Can you stop being both yourself and the wished-for version? Or has the ghost become too much a part of you to separate, too integrated to remove, too familiar to lose? Your parents are getting old. And you watch them age, knowing they never knew you, never learned who you actually are, spent decades mourning the ghost instead of meeting the real person. And now time is running out. Now the window for them to know you is closing, and you have to decide. Do you try one more time? Do you reach across the grief and demand to be seen? Or do you accept that they'll die having loved someone who never existed more than they loved you? This is the specific cruelty of time. It doesn't wait for people to come to their senses, doesn't pause the aging process until parents and children figure out how to love each other honestly. Just continues. Your parents get grayer, slower, sicker, and the distance between you stays the same. The grief doesn't resolve, the ghost doesn't fade, and death becomes inevitable while recognition remains impossible. I'm watching my own parents age, watching them move slower, forget more, need more help. And I'm thinking about how little time is left, how few holidays, how few phone calls, how few chances to be known. And I don't know what to do with that. Don't know if trying to be seen is worth the pain of failing again. Don't know if letting them die without knowing me is acceptance or cowardice. You've tried before. Tried to talk about it. Tried to say, I know I'm not who you wanted, but I'm who I am. Can you know me anyway? And they changed the subject, or said you were being dramatic, or insisted nothing was wrong, or cried and made you comfort them for feeling like bad parents when all you wanted was to be seen as their child. So you stopped trying, stopped reaching, accepted the distance as permanent. But now they're dying. Not immediately, maybe. Not tomorrow, but soon enough that the word never starts to apply. Never going to know you, never going to accept you, never going to love the actual instead of the imagined. And that never is heavy, is final, is the closing of a door you always hoped might open, and part of you is relieved. Relieved that the hoping can end, that you can stop waiting for them to see you, that their death will release you from the expectation that someday, somehow, they'll love you the way you needed to be loved. But part of you is devastated, is grieving, is mourning the relationship you never had while they're still alive to have it, is attending your own funeral while also preparing for theirs. There's a specific kind of orphaning that happens before your parents die, when you realize they're never going to know you, never going to be the parents you needed, when you're still their child, but they're not really your parents anymore. Not in the way parents are supposed to be. Not in the knowing, accepting, seeing way. And you have to grieve that. Have to mourn the parents you needed while caring for the parents you have. And nobody talks about this. Nobody says. Sometimes your parents die as strangers. Sometimes you bury people who raised you, but never knew you. Sometimes you stand at a funeral for someone who spent decades mourning you while you were still alive. And you're supposed to cry, supposed to grieve, supposed to miss them. But what do you miss? The people who loved a ghost more than they loved you. The parents who never learned who you were. Bukowski wrote, "We're all going to die, all of us. What a circus." And it is a circus. The absurdity of it. You spending your life trying to be seen by people who were too busy mourning to see you. Them spending their life disappointed in a child who was right there the whole time. Both of you missing each other. Both of you lonely. Both of you longing for something the other couldn't give. And then death, final. No more chances. No resolution. Just over. The field outside doesn't mourn what never was, doesn't grieve unlived possibilities, just exists, just is. And when the grass dies, it dies as grass, not as what grass could have been, not as potential unfulfilled, just as grass that was grass and now isn't, simple, honest, complete. But you can't be that simple, can't have that clean an ending. Because your relationship with your parents was never simple, never honest, never complete, and their death won't change that. We'll just make it permanent. We'll turn "they don't know me" into "they never knew me." We'll turn hope into historical fact. We'll turn longing into grief without the possibility of resolution. Are you ready for that? For them to die without knowing you? For the door to close forever? Or do you try again? Risk the rejection again? Reach across the grief one more time before it's too late? When your parents die, you'll feel relief, and you're not allowed to say that, not allowed to admit that their death releases you, frees you from the constant mourning, ends the performance, lets you stop carrying the ghost. You're supposed to feel only grief, only loss, only the ache of missing them, but you'll feel free, and the freedom will feel like guilt, and the guilt will feel like confirmation that you were always the disappointment they thought you were. Because good children don't feel relieved when their parents die. Good children are devastated, are destroyed. Can't imagine life without them. But you've been imagining life without them for years, been preparing for it, been rehearsing the freedom, been wondering what it'll feel like to stop waiting for their acceptance, stop hoping for their understanding, stop carrying their disappointment. And when it comes, when they finally die, the freedom is enormous, is immediate, is undeniable. You're no longer someone's disappointment, no longer someone's grief, no longer the living reminder of dashed expectations. You're just yourself, finally, fully, without the weight of their mourning attached. But you can't say this at the funeral. Can't tell people you're relieved. Can't admit that losing them feels like gaining yourself. Can't explain that you've been grieving them for decades and their actual death is just the final stage of a long mourning. Can't be honest about the relief, because honesty about relief sounds like you didn't love them. And you did love them, just couldn't be loved by them. And there's a difference. I knew someone whose parent died and they felt nothing. Not grief, not relief, just nothing. Because the parent they'd been mourning for 20 years and the parent who died were the same parent. The death didn't change anything, didn't add loss, just confirmed what had always been true, that they were alone, that they'd always been alone, that the parent had been physically present but emotionally absent for so long that their physical absence was just redundant, and people judged them for it. Said they were cold, said they must not have loved their parent, said they'd regret not grieving. But they didn't regret it, couldn't force grief for someone who'd never really been there, couldn't mourn a relationship that had died years before the person did, could only acknowledge the relief, the ending of waiting, the closing of a door that had been slowly closing for decades. This is the liberation you're not allowed to feel. The freedom that comes with their death, the release, the permission to finally fully be yourself without their disappointment watching, without their grief shadowing, without their ghost haunting. You're free. And freedom from your parents' judgment feels like betrayal, feels like proof that you were always the bad child, the ungrateful child, the child who deserved to be mourned. But you weren't bad, weren't ungrateful. You were just yourself. And yourself was never going to be enough for them, was never going to resurrect the ghost, was never going to fulfill the expectations, and spending your life trying to be enough for people who needed you to be someone else, that's not love. That's torture, and being released from torture is allowed to feel like relief. Sartre said, "Hell is other people." And sometimes other people are your parents, are the ones who should love you unconditionally but don't, are the ones who should know you best but don't, are the ones whose death releases you because their life imprisoned you. And that's not your fault. Didn't make yourself impossible to love, didn't choose to be disappointing, just chose to be real. And real wasn't what they could love, so when they die, feel the relief, feel the freedom, feel the weight lifting, and know that the guilt you feel about feeling it is them, still in your head, still making you wrong for being yourself, still insisting you should be the ghost. But they're dead now, and the ghost is dead too, has always been dead, was never real. And you're alive. Actually alive, finally free to be alive without their mourning making it heavy. The field outside will outlive me, will outlive my parents, will outlive everyone, and it won't mourn any of us, won't grieve our loss, won't miss what we could have been, just continues, just exists, just is the field after we're gone, same as it was before we came. And maybe that's the model, maybe that's the freedom, to exist without needing to be mourned, to be what you are without needing approval, to die and have it be simple, over, done, without complicated grief about who you weren't. Will you feel relief when they die? Are you allowed to admit it? Or will you perform grief like you performed being the child they needed? One last performance for people who never saw past the ghost. You don't owe the ghost anything. Don't owe it resurrection. Don't owe it your life. Don't owe it the sacrifice of who you are for who you were supposed to be. The ghost is dead, never lived, never existed. And you don't owe your existence to a fantasy. Don't owe your parents the grief they chose. Don't owe anyone the performance of being someone you're not. But you've been told otherwise. Been told you owe your parents, owe them for raising you, owe them for sacrificing for you, owe them the child they needed you to be. Been told that being yourself when yourself isn't what they wanted is selfish, is ungrateful, is betrayal of everything they did for you. And maybe they did sacrifice, maybe they did give up things for you, but they gave those things up for the ghost, for the child they imagined, not for you, the actual you, the one who made different choices, the one who became a stranger. They didn't sacrifice for you, they sacrificed for their fantasy of you, and you're not responsible for their fantasy. You don't owe them your life, don't owe them your choices. Don't owe them the abandonment of yourself. You owe them what any child owes their parents: basic respect, basic care as they age, basic acknowledgement of the relationship. But you don't owe them yourself. Don't owe them the death of who you are so the ghost can live. And knowing this, accepting this, is the only way to survive having been mourned while alive, is the only way to live with parents who loved someone else more than they loved you. You have to know, in the deepest part of yourself, that you don't owe them the ghost. Don't owe them your grief over not being the ghost. Don't owe them the performance of becoming the ghost. I'm sitting on this porch, watching the sun set over this field. And the sun doesn't apologize for setting, doesn't owe anyone perpetual daylight, just sets, does what it does, exists as it exists. And the field doesn't mourn the daylight, doesn't grieve the sun for not staying, just exists in darkness when darkness comes, just is what it is in whatever light or darkness it gets. And you can be like that, can exist as you exist without apology, can set when it's time to set, can be dark when dark is what you are, can refuse to perform perpetual daylight for parents who need you to be the sun. You don't owe them light. Don't owe them the child who never existed. Don't owe them anything except honesty, and honesty is what you've given them. Honest about who you are. Honest about who you're not. Honest about the choices you've made. That they can't accept the honesty isn't your failure, is theirs. Is their inability to love what's real instead of what's imagined. Is their choice to mourn instead of meet you. Is their grief instead of your responsibility. You gave them the truth, they chose the ghost, and that choice is theirs to live with, not yours. The ghost owes you nothing. You owe the ghost nothing. The ghost is irrelevant, is smoke, is fantasy, is the thing your parents invented to avoid the work of knowing you, and you don't have to honor it, don't have to keep it alive, don't have to carry it anymore. You can put it down. Can stop comparing yourself to it, can stop measuring against it, can stop grieving that you're not it, can just be yourself, finally, fully, without the ghost's shadow, without your parents' disappointment, without the weight of expectations you never agreed to carry. And maybe that means less contact with your parents. Maybe that means distance. Maybe that means accepting that you'll never be close, never be known, never be loved the way you needed. But maybe that's okay. Maybe distance is better than performance. Maybe unknown is better than misknown. Maybe their love for the ghost isn't worth more than your love for yourself. You get one life, one chance to be who you are. And spending it trying to be who you're not for people who'll never appreciate who you are, that's waste. That's the real tragedy. Not that you disappointed them, that they missed you, that they had you right there and chose to mourn an imagination instead. The field is still here, still being a field, didn't become a forest to please anyone, didn't try to be something else, just exists as what it is. And that's enough. That's always been enough. And you can be enough too, as what you are. Not as what you were supposed to be, just as what you are. You don't owe the ghost your life. You owe yourself your life. And living it is the only thing that matters, the only thing that's real, the only thing you can actually do. So do it. Live it. Be yourself. And let the ghost stay dead, where it's always been. So that's why your parents mourned you, why they grieved the child you didn't become, why they love a ghost more than they love you, not because you failed, because you succeeded, at becoming yourself, at choosing your life, at being real instead of imaginary, and real can't compete with fantasy when fantasy is what someone needs. If this hit you, if you felt like a disappointment for being yourself, subscribe to Raw Existence. We're not here to tell you to make peace with your parents. We're here to tell you the truth, that some parents can't love the actual, only the imagined. And that's not your failure. It's theirs. Like this video if you've ever attended your own funeral at a family dinner. If you've ever felt the silence of parental grief while sitting right there. If you've ever been mourned while alive. If you've carried the ghost. And comment below. Tell me when you realized your parents were grieving you. Tell me what choice killed the ghost. Tell me if you're still trying to resurrect it or if you've let it stay dead. I read every comment. We're all carrying ghosts we didn't create. All being mourned for choices we had to make. All trying to figure out how to live as ourselves when ourselves was never enough. Thanks for being here, for 40 minutes, for sitting with the hardest truth about family. That sometimes the people who raised you never know you, never meet you, never love the you that's real, and you have to live with that. Have to be yourself anyway, have to choose your life over their fantasy. See you in the next one. The field is still here. Still being a field, still not apologizing for what it is. And you can be like that too. Can stop apologizing, can stop performing, can stop mourning yourself through their eyes. Let the ghost stay dead. You were never the ghost. You were always you. And you is enough, was always enough, will always be enough, even if they never saw it.